On a warm August night in rural Kentucky, a farmhouse became the center of a story people still argue about nearly 80 years later. 4 adults and several children claimed small, bright-eyed figures moved through the darkness, and the question has never really gone away. This was the Hopkinsville area, just outside a small town where fields, trees, and isolated homes spread out under a wide summer sky. In places like this, a strange light or sound can feel close enough to touch. The case belongs to 1955, a period when flying saucer headlines were already shaping how Americans looked at the night. But the Sutton family's account was not about a distant light in the sky. It was about something at the windows. That evening, visitors and family members were gathered at the Sutton property when one of the men reportedly saw a glowing object streak overhead and land beyond the trees. Soon after, the house itself became the focus of the fear. What followed was a sequence the witnesses described with remarkable consistency. Tapping at the walls, movement outside, and small figures appearing at the windows and door. The shapes were said to be short, silver-grey, and unnervingly quick. The family later said the figures seemed to hover or glide rather than walk normally, with long arms, pointed ears, and glowing eyes catching the light. Whether seen clearly or in flashes, the image lodged itself in local memory. For hours, the household claimed it was under pressure from outside, with shots fired from shotguns and pistols as the figures darted away and returned. The weapons, the darkness, and the confusion all became part of the case. In the morning, investigators and reporters arrived to find a story already spreading far beyond the farm. By then, the event had transformed from a family disturbance into one of the most famous close encounter claims in American folklore. The setting matters because the farmhouse sat in open country, where sightlines were long and anything unusual could stand out sharply against the dark. At the same time, isolation can magnify fear, sound, and misunderstanding. Still, the family's account was not a single fleeting glimpse. They described repeated appearances, as if the strange visitors were circling the house and testing its edges before finally withdrawing into the night. That repetition is one reason the case endures. A lone light can be dismissed quickly, but a pattern of sightings from different people and different angles asks for a fuller explanation. The most striking detail remains the description of the beings themselves, small, almost child-sized figures with metallic-looking skin and oversized eyes. In witness memory, they were not graceful or majestic, but startlingly close and immediate. Another detail that keeps the story alive is the family's reaction. They did not describe a calm, theatrical performance. They described panic, confusion, and the desperate instinct to keep the strange presence outside the house. Local law enforcement was called, and officers reportedly found no obvious intruder when they arrived. Yet the witnesses maintained that something had been there, and that the night had already changed them. That gap between what was seen and what could be confirmed is where the mystery deepens. The case sits in the uneasy space between testimony, fear, and whatever may have moved through that yard. Supporters of the extraordinary reading point to the number of witnesses and the consistency of the core description. They also note that the family kept returning to the same details, even as the story became famous. The timing also matters. This happened during a decade when reports of strange craft and unusual beings were surfacing across the country, and the Kentucky case fit a larger cultural pattern in a way that still feels hard to ignore. Some researchers have suggested the witnesses may have mistaken owls, bats, or other animals seen in harsh lighting and under stress. In a tense rural night, familiar shapes can become strangely unfamiliar. Others have pointed to the role of alcohol, excitement, and the power of a story spreading among friends and neighbors. Those factors can distort a night's events, especially when everyone is already on edge. Even so, those explanations do not fully erase the central claim. Multiple people believed they saw the same small figures more than once in the same place over the course of a long night. That persistence is what keeps investigators interested. The strongest believer case rests on the sheer texture of the account. There were specific movements, specific body shapes, and a specific geography around the house that made the story feel less like a vague legend and more like a witnessed event. And yet the evidence is still mostly human testimony, which is powerful but imperfect. No clear photograph, no preserved physical trace, and no definitive official conclusion ever settled the matter. That absence leaves room for both wonder and caution. A night like this can be remembered with extraordinary clarity, but memory can also sharpen some details while blurring others. What makes the Hopkinsville case unusual is not only the alleged beings, but the way the story holds together across decades. It remains vivid because it is anchored in a real place, a real family, and a real night of fear. If something ordinary was misread that night, it was misread in a way that still echoes through one of the most talked-about encounters in American history. If something unknown was present, it left behind a legend that refuses to fade. The case also survives because it resists easy closure. Every explanation seems to solve part of it, then leaves behind another question about why the witnesses were so certain and why the story spread so fast. That tension is the heart of the Hopkinsville Goblin encounter. It sits between folklore and field report, between the known landscape of Kentucky and a night that seemed to open onto something else. For believers, the case hints that the strange can arrive close to home, not as a distant light, but as a presence at the threshold. For skeptics, it is a reminder of how quickly a tense night can become a lasting legend. What remains difficult is the emotional core of the account. Several people, in the same house, reacting to the same fear, and insisting for years that they had seen something real. That kind of certainty deserves to be taken seriously, and if the night was shaped by misidentification, it was still a night powerful enough to become part of the country's enduring mystery archive. The legend did not grow from nothing, it grew from a place and a moment. Decades later, the farmhouse is quieter. But the questions remain active. What did the witnesses actually see? And why did the encounter feel so immediate that it still unsettles people who only hear the story secondhand? The Hopkinsville Goblin encounter endures because it never fully resolves into either pure folklore or pure explanation. It stands at the edge of both, where curiosity begins and certainty ends,